The fastest bike yet.
You'll arrive at your destination before you've even left.
Lightweight is better than aero.
More speed.
Aero is better than lightweight.
Market leading stiffness.
Light
is 170.
4% stiffer than the undisclosed bike in our test.
Are all product claims as good as they sound, or should we take them with a pinch of salt? We sat down with Josh Poertner to find out more and see if any of these bold claims can be trusted or busted.
A lot of these factories, there's one frame being made, and at the end of the line, they're weighing them, and these become this model. And
No way. One of them's crafted by unicorns. Today we're joined by Josh Poertner, who has 24 years experience in the bike industry and counting, working for Zip, and now he's the proprietor of Silka. Now, we want to pick Josh's brain about myths and tricks in the bike industry. Is it all a big conspiracy?
Yeah, Josh, I feel like you might be nervous talking about this subject, but we're not.
A lot of pressure.
Yeah, we're not. I kind of want to make it clear. I'm not trying to get you or any of us here to sort of throw any brands under the bus as such, but I wanted to talk about concepts and ways that brands are perhaps like presenting information in a certain way, or little tricks of how they're making stuff lighter, or what could be perceived as misleading but can also be read as like it's a fact if you see it in a certain way.
Yeah.
Is there any way
Is it
you
just
want
all
to start?
good marketing?
Yeah. Like where do you want to start on this pretty broad subject in terms? Have you got anywhere you want to start or not?
No.
Okay, I'll throw it out.
I can start us off.
Yeah, go on.
Right. Aero testing. Brands always. Every brand's product is the fastest according to their own graph.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Explain.
How
please.
can the viewers make sense of any of this? Should they just ignore it all, or is some aero testing better than others? And how can they disseminate?
Oh, that is a good one. I'm a firm believer that most all companies, maybe not all of them, but most all of them, certainly the big name ones, are all being as honest as they can with you. But I will say that they are developing, the companies developing products in the wind tunnel are definitely developing products around their tunnel and their protocol and their standards. And so I think, they are being generally honest when they say this is the fastest thing in these conditions. So it's sort of a very complicated version of my standard, it depends line. That, there are companies that are doing wheel only in the tunnel. And I have no doubt if they say that this wheel with this tire in this tunnel was faster than that wheel, that they're being honest with you. Now, maybe it took 4 runs to get that data. Maybe their protocol, protocol is a good example of, like if you... Traditionally, wind tunnel testing was what they would call like yaw out testing. So you'd go like 0 and then 2, 5, 7.5, 10 out. Well, the flow will remain attached much farther out. And then when it stalls, it'll stall over a pretty wide range of angles. So, you might stall at 15 on one run and 17.5 on the next run. And maybe if you go slow enough, you can get it to 20.
I see, yeah.
Right, and so, but when you come backwards, detached flow doesn't reattach very readily. And so, like, when I was at Zip, we actually inverted the test, and we would take the wheels all the way to 30 and then bring them back. And so you talk about the hysteresis loop. It does one thing going out, and it does another thing coming back. So, like, our data always looked much worse than our competitors' data because we were using this different protocol. But the protocol allowed us to make wheels that we believed were faster in the real world because you don't have the beautiful attached laminar flow. But a lot of that early testing was wheel only, and so people would say, well, it's not in a bike. And then when you say, well, let's test it in a bike, but what bike? And now the bike is influencing the testing. And so you can kind of go on and on with that. We tested with bike brand A, and you tested with bike brand B, and now who's... So I don't think it's as much of a dishonesty thing as much as it's just the marketing department probably presents a relatively narrow situation as being broadly applicable.
Right? I guess you would, wouldn't you? If I made a product and I tested it 10 times in the wind tunnel and I've got the worst possible outcome and the best possible outcome, you're not going to just go, oh, here's the worst performance it did in the winter. You'd be an idiot to do that, wouldn't you? But you've got to accept that there's going to be a variation in the test results, and I think what you've mentioned is that there's a huge variation in how people are doing it. So do you think it would be, well, presumably I think it would be great if we could have a standardised protocol that everyone followed. Yeah. And do you think that would ever exist?
No.
Just point blank, no.
I say no because the differences between tunnels and differences between what different people are looking for, that I think you would never get that agreement. I mean, it's like we have that with chain testing right now. I mean, there's nobody wants to agree on how to properly test lubricants, and people then have biases towards what makes them look good. And so, certainly if you're a major brand and your stuff is looking great in the way that you're testing, you want the whole world to test like the way you test.
If you don't think there's ever going to be a standardized testing, but you think everyone has got, is giving the best that they can give from their process, do you think it's all close enough between different brands in the margin of going, do you know what, the best bike that every brand makes is pretty much as good as the best bike everyone else makes? Do you think the top ones are so close that it's comparable?
I would say certainly within categories, we've seen real convergence. Some of that's the UCI rules, and which are now changed. But with 3-to-1, I mean, I think the top Aero road bikes are all, within a couple percent of each other. The top lightweight bikes are all within a few percent of each other. It'll be interesting to see what this next year brings with the changes to the UCI rules and allowing these deeper cord length airfoils and things.
Mm-hmm.
That what do people do with that? And I think it's a little bit like Formula One racing, right? The cars all look different the first year after the rule change, and then 4 years later they all pretty much look the same. And It's time to change the rules. We see that in cycling, and it'll be an exciting year or two as we see what people try.
So here's a sort of thought experiment question for you. One, you mentioned Formula One. Now, one of the things that I don't like about Formula One is the fact that the car dominates too much. And whoever has the best car, that invariably usually is one of the top 4 best drivers. They win everything, right? It happens constantly, right? Yeah. So if we take Jonas Vingegaard and then we play like World Tour bike roulette with him, and he just gets any random bike from any, it fits him, or, it's his size and everything, so that's all perfect.
Yeah.
But it's the different brand bike, it's got the different tyres on it, it's got all the whatever. Could he still win the Tour de France on any bike? How much difference does the marginal gains of the slightly different bikes and the slightly different tyres make in the grand scheme?
That is a hard question.
Go on, it depends.
I would say the level from the top to the bottom, certainly of the bikes that are at the World Tour level, has really compressed. Even a few years back, there was a huge discrepancy. And trying to think of, and I won't name them, but trying to think of like what the worst bike in the Pro Tour is, it's still pretty reasonable bike.
Yeah.
The time trial would be, there's still a bigger gap there across brands.
And what's causing the biggest gap?
I would say a lack of understanding of aerodynamics by some of the smaller brands, and particularly some of the smaller European brands have been really slow to catch up. You think of it was the Americans, all the way back to Le Mans '89, right? Really bringing sort of this mindset change of we're Americans, like screw it, we're like put the clip-ons on, and it doesn't matter what you look like, and we're really driving a lot of that development, and these European brands were a bit more old school, and they were slower to catch on, and they just these other brands have a 10-year head start. Now, a lot of the top European brands have really caught up and in some cases surpassed. You look at the top teams now, all have like performance or technical directors, most of whom have engineering backgrounds. And I think that just brings a little bit of a different mindset to the team, but it also is a strong signal to the team that, we're paying good money to hire this person to make these decisions, and now you, the rider, are going to execute on that decision. And I've struggled with that. For my whole career, thinking back to CSC, where you had all these innovative companies bringing all these innovative products that the European guys all thought would never work and were terrible and looked bad. And I mean, we got so much crap with that team, but it worked because you had Bjarne Riis, who was just you're riding the Aero bike and wheels, damn it. And the rider's like, okay. But they didn't believe it. It took years for that to happen.
Something we've got here that we wanted to discuss, I think, Ollie, this was your point you wanted to make was about some of the white papers which are published around testing of certain products. And when that data that's published doesn't necessarily specifically say, it goes into every single possible detail and number that you could fathom about the whole subject.
Says that their product's the best.
Yeah, apart from the one crucial bit of information you need, which is, what the hell was it tested against?
Yeah, it just says competitor XYZ
Does that
product. And you're like, well...
Does it remove some of the weight behind it? And do you wish that people were more open about it?
Why do they do that?
Oh, I think they do it to not overly poke or legitimize a competitor. I think it's... I said this in my Zip days, and I think Gerard, I've heard him say it, but, one of my proudest things was that, when I was at Zip, we were always second best in everyone else's testing. And that's a real legitimizer, right?
Yeah.
And then, Cervelo had that going for a long time too. Everybody who put a white paper out, they were always beating the Cervelo.
Right. I'll tell you one where that wasn't the case. I went to a launch years ago for the Merida Reacto. It was the Gen 2 Merida Reacto. You remember the one with the Rui Costa advert where it was like, more bike? That one. Anyway. They stand up, they do the presentation, and they have their white paper with the graph and stuff. They positioned themselves number 2. And the Cervelo S5 they were like, okay, hands up, Cervelo S5's faster than our bike, but our bike is just a little bit slower, but it's faster than everyone else's.
But that, I
actually found that more believable.
Yeah. Why do people not do that? Because I feel like everyone would then believe it. Because in the era we live in, everyone's skeptical about everything. So, do you think we'll ever get there? Do you wish that we could do that? Do you think it should be enforced?
I don't know how you'd enforce it. I would like to see more transparency there. I don't think it's going to happen.
You said you don't want to legitimize other brands. So you're saying Zip was always second, and that kind of legitimized Zip as being the benchmark thing. But does it all? I mean, I've always assumed it was because they didn't actually back their testing enough to stand up to scrutiny. There's another reason.
Yeah, that could be too. I mean, there's one of the big arguments, particularly with bikes, are things like, well, what was the setup? What were the cables? I'm a huge believer that you should have photos of every run. If you're going to publish a white paper, and of course, if you have photos, you're giving away what the bike is. But, but there's a lot to be said for, we did this bike that, had exposed cables, and this one had hidden cables, and we didn't bother to do this one with cables, or we cherry-picked our run, to your point of earlier, we did 6 runs and we picked the best one.
Something we're interested in is the continual evolution of things getting more betterer. Okay?
More better, yeah.
We see it in other, industries, like the new iPhone comes out, it's got new features that the previous one didn't have. What's the equivalent of that in the bike industry?
Stiffness.
Well, that's it. I mean, how can it get that much stiffer? Yeah. It's always stiffer every year.
I think everybody is generally saying some mix of the same couple of things, right? We're stiffer, lighter, and more aero than the prior version.
You can work in marketing.
Laterally stiff, yet vertically compliant.
Yeah.
I'm upset that I've said that somewhere in a video somewhere, and you're both laughing at it.
I've said it too at some point.
It's an interesting one. We talk about modes of stiffness. I would just love to see, company like Tour Magazine test for this, which we've talked about leads companies to tend to want to go stiffer and stiffer, but I would just love to see companies talk about the different modes of stiffness around the various axes and what their numbers are.
Remember a couple of years back when you picked up your new, I'll say it doesn't matter, but your new Canyon Ultimate, and you were like, God, this is bloody light, and it is. And then you went, hold on, they've already fitted TPU inner tubes in it from the factory.
Sneaky.
That's kind of a little bit of a sensible trick.
Yeah.
And I wonder, it feels like our brows are missing a trick here. You can make your bike what 300-400 grams lighter maybe by doing a couple of little changes like that, and like it makes it seem 10 times better.
Yeah. Well, it's. I mean, that was like a clever sort of thing that I think some bike brands did. You know, when I was working as a journalist, I used to think, oh, fair play.
Yeah.
Like, you know, they would, because they know what's the one thing that they always do in a bike magazine review is weigh the bike out the box and publish the weight.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's an absolute easy win. You just save yourself 200 grams.
Yeah,
like by
and-
putting some lighter tyres and tubes on.
Which
And
is
that's
not
like-
really costing you much. Or you could spend millions trying to make a frame 200 grams lighter.
Right.
I
Now,
mean-
is that the spec, or had they just done that to that?
I
No,
think it's
they
a
had
spec,
they
yeah.
had they
That's
had
the spec.
specced it in that way, but I was like,
Oh, yeah.
fair enough. Like that's a good easy win.
Something else I want to just talk about is manufacturing locations and costs, because I think if you roll back however many years across any different brands you want to look at, I think generally it's fair to say most products were made much closer to that brand's home, wherever that is around the world. And now we're starting to see things made the opposite side of the world, potentially maybe on a cost-only basis, that people have gone, look, we can make it cheaper over this side of the world than over here. So do you think people should be more upfront about that? Famous thing I'm thinking of is when things are labelled up as like designed in California. And then you're like, well, okay, yeah, it is designed in California, but it's perhaps made somewhere
Or a
completely
bike brand
different.
says it's made in a European country, and all it's been done is assembled there.
Yeah.
Like they've fitted the group set, or they've maybe painted it.
Yeah, like
But
have
they've
you
not
got
like what most people would regard as being manufactured
Start to finish.
has happened in Asia.
My Zip tenure, I mean, we just watched the whole industry leave for Asia. And the challenge there is that, you know, you had all these companies making stuff in the States. They all left, we stayed. And one, you lose the knowledge base. And so you never get that back. But then two, now you're price competing because, you know, carbon's a global commodity. It costs pretty much the same wherever you are. For a given, you know, Toray T700, it costs the same in Taiwan as it does in California, but the labor is a huge difference. And, you know, there's hours of labor in a carbon frame. There's probably an hour plus in a rim. So if you can cut your labor cost from, you know, $20 an hour to $2, that's a meaningful savings. And then that comes through as a price cut. And so I think that the challenge there for the manufacturers and the brands really is, you know, nobody's doing that to get rich in the bike industry.
Yeah.
Like we're really bad at making money in the bike industry, but they are using that to be as kind of a club to cudgel their competitors on price, right? Oh, you're a $2,000 thing. Well, I'm an $1,800 thing for that's lighter or whatever that works out to be. So I think in a lot of areas we're just going to keep seeing that manufacturing move until we eventually get to Africa when that's feasible.
Yeah.
Whatever the lowest cost places. But I do think, you know, certainly the pandemic taught us, man, supply chains, when they break even a little bit, they break a lot. And things get scarce, things get expensive. I mean, it really gets hard to do business when things are that complex coming from that many places around the world. And so I do think we're going to see for the next few years a little bit more what people are calling like onshoring or reshoring. But I think for some things it's just gone.
what would be a couple of products that you think, okay, be mindful on the marketing and advantages?
Oh, that's a hard one. I think probably the biggest one, honestly, are ceramic bearings.
Yeah, okay.
I will take credit. In 2000, we put that I know of the first ceramic bearings in wheels for Jan Ulrich's Olympic-winning wheel set, because they supplied us a hub from Germany that was terrible and notchy, and I had a friend who worked for a company that made ceramic bearings, and so we bought some, put them in. He won the Olympics, and we said, let's take this to market. It's the biggest miss of my career, truly, that I thought, we'll put it on the price sheet. They're $1,000. It'll get a bunch of attention, but nobody will buy them. And then like 2 years later, I meet Jakob at Ceramic Speed. And like, you made a whole company out of this. Like, what? I missed the boat here. But really, realistically, 6 ceramic bearings in your standard hub set, you're talking 0.7, 0.8 watts at 30 miles per hour. It's almost nothing. And really, most of those savings are actually coming from the lack of seals.
Yeah.
And so, the videos you see on Instagram of people spinning the pulley and it spins for a minute, it does that because there's no seals or grease in it, or it's got a super thin oil. By the time you get some grease in it, the 0.8 is probably 0.6, and then it's unsealed, and so you ride it in the rain one time, and now it's probably about even to a steel bearing. So you really have to take better care of your ceramic bearings because they're not non-contact seals. So I'd say that's one that, to me, at the absolute top level, if you're Jonas, you need ceramic bearings.
Yeah.
For the rest of us, they're probably, once you've ridden them for a month, they're probably no longer doing the thing that you're doing, and you spent a lot of money on them. So I would say that's a big obvious one.
I'm going to throw one out there. Uber lightweight and expensive bottle cages. You think how much money you could spend on that? And it's not going to make a difference to how your bike rides. It's not going to change how fast you go. If anything, it might mean your bottle falls out. Anything that you can think of? Any other ones, guys?
I just think the difference in a top tier frame set.
Okay, yeah.
I think going from the classic example is just from going from say the Specialized to the S-Works model.
Yeah.
It's a huge step up in price for something that's typically 200 grams lighter.
That concept translates, doesn't it?
Yeah, and you think 200 grams, what difference that actually makes, even on a climb like Alpe d'Huez, a massive climb.
Yeah.
It's so little, but we seem to be very good as human beings at placing a far greater emphasis on that weight difference than what it actually realistically makes.
Yeah, I would add to that. A lot of these frames, and not picking on anyone in particular, but a lot of these factories, there's one frame being made, and at the end of the line, they're weighing them, and these become this model. And
No way.
That's the biggest myth come out right now.
Oh no!
Right,
that
save
cannot
that.
be true.
That's going to the front of the video.
But one of them's crafted by unicorns, and is it's made from material that's come from meteorites.
That's an absolute mega bombshell to end on. Right, the bike industry is a conspiracy.
So
you're just hand selecting the lighter ones, and those are going up. But I will say, it's I haven't been in a frame factory in a couple of years now, but certainly the last time I was in one. One of the things that they do is they'll say, it has this fiber in it or that fiber in it, and it's probably, the size of a credit card in a chainstay or something. But, when you mold the frame, it purges resin, and the frames that purge more resin are lighter. And so those tend to be earmarked and go to the higher model if there's multiple, the -7 versus the -8 versus the -9 or whatever that works for that particular brand. The other one I would say is, very, very few carbon frames can go unpainted, clear coated or unpainted.
Yeah, okay.
But those are the best frames that get made in that factory in the month, and typically they're a lot more expensive, and there's much fewer of them. And then the more paint on the bike, typically those are the ones that have little voids or pinholes, and so you're a little bit of Bondo, a little cover up, stuff like that. It happens.
Well, the cool thing is, because you with about Orbea, when you buy an Orbea, you can pick as a paint, as your finish option.
Yeah.
One of the options is the raw one. So you're saying go for the raw one with clear coat.
Yeah.
Because then, without paying any extra, you're probably going to end up with a better frame.
Yeah, maybe that's like a legit.
We don't know if that's what they do, but
who knows. Well, that is an absolutely mega way to finish this video. Josh, love that you saved that to the end.
Yeah, wow.
Let us know in the comments section down below. Get involved, share your thoughts on little tricks and myths and tips that you think the industry has, and we can just enjoy sharing them, can't we? Josh, thanks. That was amazing.
Cheers, Josh.
Thanks, guys.